I'm so excited to invite Dr. Surya Pathak, Professor, University of Washington, Bothell School of Business, to moderate a very interesting panel discussion on AI in supply chain. Let me take a quick moment to introduce Surya. Dr. Surya Pathak received his PhD in interdisciplinary management of technology from Vanderbilt University in 2005. Prior to joining the University of Washington, he has served as a research and technical lead at the Advanced Computing Center for Research and Education, developing next-generation network-based data storage technology. He is a founding member of the Complex Adaptive Supply Network Research Accelerator at Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. His research focuses on supply network issues related to both the supplier and customer management, using network theory, optimization, econometrics, AI, and ML methods. He is the founder and CEO of Sequest IP and EdTech company. Now that we know who we're going to hear from next, audience, this is a reminder for you. You can submit your questions via the Q&A tab, which is at the bottom of your screen. Without further ado, Surya, the screen is all yours.
Thank you, Ambika. That was a very kind introduction. I am super excited. This is the right time to be engaging in supply chain management discussions because it has become a household name. If we can have the slide deck that goes with our panel discussion today on the screen. So I'm going to work with some of the leading experts who are working in different aspects of supply chain. And I think we're going to do a quick round of introductions first with our panelists, and then we are going to take it over from there. So I'm going to let the introductions take first. So with us is Vikas Goel, is Director of Data Science at Flipkart. And you have had such an illustrious career, and you have actually transcended different industries. Can you talk a little bit about your journey in the supply chain field, very quick intro to our audience?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Vikas Goel. I currently lead data science at Flipkart for supply chain. I've been in this role for about a year. I have 17 years of experience. Before this, I worked at ExxonMobil, which is one of the largest oil and gas companies. And my journey actually in this space started with a PhD at Carnegie Mellon. My background is in optimization under uncertainty. And then at Exxon, I worked across different parts of I was in the team that does data science and optimization. And most of my focus was in the supply chain space, transportation, logistics, across a broad, the upstream side of that business, the midstream side of the business. And then, I took a bunch of management roles, leading teams, building organizations. Then, I saw there's so much exciting stuff happening in the data science space, in e-commerce, and I decided to take the plunge. And, it's been really exciting over the last year and a half.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for sharing the background. It is indeed an incredible time to be a supply chain professional right now, because we haven't seen times like this ever, I must say, at least not in our living days. Well, I'm very excited to welcome our next panelist, Shilpa Dhopate. Shilpa, we have known each other. Shilpa and I have been panelists on other panels. And Shilpa, you are an industry leader with a wealth of experience that once again transcends multiple industries. Can you introduce us to your journey in the field? I just wanted to put a shout out that Shilpa is also mentor, and she speaks for women in coding. She does incredible stuff. Shilpa, can you share a little bit of your journey with our audience?
Thank you, Surya. Yes, for sure. We have been co-panelists, and that's how our journey goes. And I have high regards and respect for Surya. So I have been overall 10 years experience with IBM, 10 years experience with American Express. And in this 20 years of my years across, I have been mostly involved in developing solutions across fintech, to serve our customers. So when I was at IBM, really providing consulting services, providing platforms, building frameworks and solutions, and same has I've continued in my current role where I am in at American Express. For this panel is though I've all of my views. What I'm going to talk about is going to be not from an American Express standpoint. It's my personal standpoint, being in the fintech industry and being an engineering leader in this space. And I'm going to bring my point of view to this discussion.
Well, Shilpa, and I think that's essentially what I was hoping for you would bring to the table, because it's not so much company specific, but it's really industry and multi-industry specific opportunities that we look at today when we talk about modern day supply chains and what does it mean. So we're looking forward to some of that. But before we start, I want to last but definitely not the least, my very good friend Aman Goyal, who he's, as we call, ex-Amazonian, and now actually doing some really exciting things at Chewy. So Aman, share a little bit of your journey before we get started.
Sure. I started also like in the heart of supply chain back in India in Tata Motors. One of my earliest projects was Tata Nano. With launch of Tata Nano back in 2008. Then I mainly has been working for Amazon for a decade, where I ran the network fulfillment strategy for the US, Canada, and some emerging markets, not globally, but for US and Canada. That's where I think Amazon had the most growth of becoming just a fulfillment organization to launching the middle mile, last mile, first mile, an importer, and launching its own airlines, so to speak. I kind of saw that journey. And then most recently, I have been entrusted to lead the supply chain transformation at Chewy, which for those of you who don't know, is a major e-commerce player in the pet industry, currently only serving the US market. So we basically are a one-stop shop for all pet-related needs, from food, pharmacy, grooming services, insurances, what have you. And very happy to be here.
Well, thank you, Aman. Thank you, Shilpa, and thank you, Vikas. Let's get the ball rolling, as they say. And it's going to be an exciting set of discussions coming forward. So, Aman, maybe we'll just start with you first. And if I can have the slide deck go up on the screen, please. Thank you. So today's theme, if you will, is intelligent supply chains. And let's find out what's so intelligent about it. What does that word mean? Because what I have seen is that it's also sometimes used without the right context. It actually does not mean much. So specifically, we want to look at the role of AI, ML. What is this new set of technologies? What role is it going to play to kind of reshape how supply chains are going to be managed, designed, operated, maintained, or scaled, actually, for that matter. So next slide, please. So I wanted to preface this with the mac and cheese crisis story. So, and none of you would know what this story is, because this is a very personal story. So this pre-pandemic, supply chains were, running like a fine-tuned machine, right? And for most parts of it, we will still see the occasional shortages here and there. And then the pandemic happened and it became a household name. How did it become a household name? My brother and I were actually talking to each other one day, and my 7-year-old niece actually comes running inside and says, "Dad, we need to go to Costco." Like, why? Why do we need to go to Costco? Says, mac and cheese. They're going to run out of mac and cheese. And so it's like catastrophe, right? And it's like, why are they going to run out of mac and cheese? And she says, like, don't you know it's the supply chain? So this is a 7-year-old, and I'm not making this story up. This is the real story. And so it's become a household name. Next slide, please. And, one of the reasons behind such prolific rise of consumer demand, consumption patterns changing, supply chain 4.0, I think so many of our audience members would actually probably already know about this. See, the whole thing about this story is actually about the world and the society getting more and more interconnected. So, consumption patterns are changing. The way you consume things are changing. So on the right-hand side screen of this picture, it says orders for arrival tomorrow, 3 to 3:30 p.m., right? It's not even 3 to 3:30. Vikas and Aman, you guys are used to like 2-hour delivery, 1-hour delivery. Now, it's like the expectations are changing from a consumption point. So the demand pull that happens, that triggers everything in the system, has fundamentally shifted. So there's more and more focus on connectivity on the warehouse side, on the distribution side, on the upstream supplier side, how to actually coordinate this enormously complex system, which you don't even know, you don't have a full visibility on. And on top of that, you are now adding this set of technology that relies on data. So I'm hoping to hear some words of wisdom from each one of you as to how are you guys tackling it? What are some of the key factors you're looking into? And in order to facilitate this discussion, make it a little easier for our viewers, I am splitting this into 3 parts. We'll talk about from the demand planning part. And so, Aman, if you could speak a little bit about that. And then we'll go to the middle mile, last mile. And then Shilpa, we will rely on you on the role of fintech and process automation, because that's coming in such a big way and it's going to open up opportunities. So next slide, please. Let's start with Aman. Let's start with you. Demand planning. So I have 2 generic questions for you. So feel free to use, and I think some of your talking points that I wanted are there. So I'll help you advance the slides, or you can just say next slide. How is AI and ML technology shaping the future of demand planning? It's a very broad question, but you are involved in transforming Chewy's entry into this whole market, because they're based out of a very different geography. Now you're opening up an entire area up here. So there is a design aspect to this whole supply chain piece that would be very interesting. And share with us some key challenges. And then as we go on with the conversation, we will interject with a few clarifications maybe. So share something about demand planning, how you are handling it.
Absolutely. I will just point out one silver lining of the supply chain shortage that you just mentioned, Surya, is now my cousins and my uncles and aunts hold my job much higher esteem.
Yes,
because,
absolutely.
It's now it's not, you don't just issue purchase orders and call up vendors to order more stuff and that's my job. It used to be in their eyes, but now I guess I get a little bit more gravitas, if you will, at family dinner.
Yeah.
So demand planning, next slide, please. Just to get us started, I'm just going to go over a very brief what demand planning in the context of today is essentially is the primary metric of any organization of what they're going to deliver. If it is a service company, how many customers, new, old, they're going to do. If it's a retail company, how much product they're going to sell in future. And it is very critical to have a demand planning team, because that's the one that kind of sets the theme for all the other organizations, subsidiaries, partners for the organization. Like I'm not exaggerating when I say that demand planning for an e-commerce company would define how many toilet paper rolls you would need to procure in the next 12 months across its entire fulfillment center network. So that's why demand planning is the fundamental North Star for the entire organization and all its verticals. As I said, it is the starting point of all the secondary, tertiary forecasts that are based on, which is how much revenue, sales, marketing budgets, procurement budgets, any other kind of secondary forecast that you need is derived from your original demand plan. And then this third piece is very important, is a demand plan must consume any big or small initiatives that an organization is undertaking, which includes expansion into new geography or new product offering or new mode of delivery, like a fast delivery service, or a new channel delivery, like pick it up, curbside, and whatnot. So
one of Aman, I'm going to interject here for a quick one. So any students who are attending the session, I would like to point out that this is where the strategic aspect of supply chain management becomes so critical, because supply chains are just not just a function that happens. It actually supports the strategic backbone of the entire organization. And I think what you mean by consumption is that it needs to have those strategic inputs in mind. Otherwise, you don't know what system you're designing.
That's right. Actually, so I would like to expand on that point is demand plan is not a single dimension demand plan of the organization. It probably has 200 sub metrics within itself, which are all important to the organization, which includes demand by region, by geography, by different weeks of the year, by different seasonality peaks, by different product categories like perishable, non-perishable, hard goods, electronics, and so on. So demand plan is a very detailed 2x2 or like X by X metric of the entire horizon in whatever subcategories are important to the organization for every week in the horizon. So that's how detailed it has to be of any worth for the organization.
So this is a good segue to say, all right, so what role is AI and ML playing into that picture now? So we're talking about a lot of data. So enlighten us on that.
That's right. So can I have the next slide? So I think the very obvious thing which we don't need to focus too much on is any computer or any program algorithmic based system is capable of absorbing far more number of data, like exponentially more than any team of humans can do, which is in itself a big is a tall order. If you're selling 10 million orders or 10 million items to customers a week, and you want to kind of consume the geographic nature of it, which zip codes or pin codes each one of them is going, what orders are selling together the most, what orders are selling on a particular day of the week versus not, what orders have a very cyclical rhythm to it versus which ones are like more affected by meta things happening of celebrities or other festivals and so on. That in itself is a major undertaking for any kind of demand plan, is to consume those 10 million points a week and then keep on absorbing them and predict how that kind of translates to future. So that's kind of a given. I don't think anybody would be alien to that concept. The second part, which is the machine learning part, I think is a more nuanced one, because for a human, we all suffer to some extent recency bias, and that is something which you can program an ML model to avoid. Although there's only a limit to till which you can do that, but a continuous learning piece, and then also with the ability to look back on an year-over-year comparison and so on, or week-over-week comparison, is very powerful tool in which machine learning is far exceeding the piece. Like, I can give you an example of how this has kind of come into play recently. Is there is a thing called affinity SKUs, in which, as I mentioned, there are things which are sold together. And a lot of times one SKU or a raise in demand of one SKU would almost lead to kind of indicate that this other SKU's demand will grow up. So just before the pandemic started, we now know in hindsight, but if you think about it, the first wave was toys for kids, because all the parents were like crazy that, okay, we need toys. Kids are not in daycare, we need toys. Yes. The second wave was home office equipment, because now you have to work from home. And that automatically triggered that now next third one would be exercise and workout equipment. And the fourth one would be like just people have now started to do more home cooking and less going out. So these things, actually, some of them were ML were able to predict that with a heavy increase of one category would almost be followed by a heavy increase in some other category, which actually played out to the book as the pandemic happened. So that is something which demand planning, it's not like the demand planning models predicted the pandemic, but given the pandemic and the signals, they were able to prepare the organizations for what's to follow. It's a whole different ballgame that if the organization had that stuff to deliver, but that's not what demand planning is. Demand planning is to give you a eyeglass to look into. Yeah, sorry.
No. Sorry to interrupt, but this is so interesting. The way you're putting it in is that one of the key enablers that becomes is the ability to handle multidimensional data. Because inherently, what you have with demand planning is it is multidimensional in nature. There's so many inputs, as you said, is being consumed. And sometimes, traditional methods fail because they are not able to handle it simultaneously as effectively as what we are able to do now with some of these more upcoming methods that machine learning is making it enabled. And part of it is also related to then having access to data and stuff like that. Of course, those are constraints. But so AI and ML is playing a huge role in kind of modernizing the way information is consumed, processed, and then used into the strategic planning process. So is that a fair statement to make?
Absolutely. I think what you pointed out is exactly right, but that very statement is a double-edged sword. And then that's what I'm going to cover in my next slide is
let's get there.
You have to really know what you're looking at. And I'm just going to come to that point. Can we move to the next slide, please? So this is, I think, where I would like to have most of the discussion of rest of my time. And if you have questions, this is the area where you should really poke holes in the use of AI and ML in demand planning. First and foremost, all the AI and ML, they are very agnostic of causality, right? They run millions of regression models and they try to find a fit or resonance, if you will, but they're not really trying to define what caused what. They can tell you what follows what, but not what caused what, which is something only you have to use an intelligence and human intelligence there to kind of decipher. The second one is obviously, it will not be able to predict if there are some political or macroeconomic situations going on. That's a given. The third one, low accuracy with new offerings. I have an example that I can quickly share. Is a lot of one-hit wonders. They cause a huge headache, and they lose a lot of bridging and kind of explanation writing and white papers that needs to be written. When one-time hits, they cause things. And I give an example is a couple of years ago, there was this new SKU, a fidget spinner that just got picked up, and every teenager from the age of 8 till 18 wanted one or many in their hands. And it got so much that all the MI models, they predicted a very high demand for the rest of the year. And most of these suppliers were import or exported from China and Southeast Asia, where they were taking orders for 6 months advance, and they placed the orders. Obviously, the fad passed, and nobody. And now the industry then was sitting with millions and millions of fidget spinners, which they were just giving away now in talent shows or in engagement things at conferences and whatnot. So that's where I think an ML and AI clearly failed, is to kind of separate a trend from like a one flash in the pan, if you will. Yeah. And last but not the least, and I really would like to drive this point home, is as more and more complications become and you add layers and layers of inputs to give the output, there are very few individuals in an organization which understand how things are working in the predictive models. And that itself is an organizational blocker, because it prohibits a high-level decision making, because so few people understand the outputs and how they're driven and affected by the macroeconomic, the one-hit things, or the causality of it. That in itself, I've seen multiple times when in organizations they crumble, at least periodically, because the people who are creating the demand plan are mostly like statisticians and anthropologists and like mathematicians who are doing the modeling, but not really are in the room when huge strategic decisions are being made. And they are the ones who can truly understand the model or the AI itself, but not the business part of it. So that's kind of a Chinese wall that exists in many organizations that I've seen. But I would say that that's a definite, we should acknowledge that as a limitation as we bring more and more intelligence. It's not raising the fundamental level of intelligence of every person in the organization. So
it's a very interesting observation, because supply chain 5.2, as we'll see later down in the panel discussion, is actually now addressing that straight up, is that you need to bring down those walls. But this is so. All right, let's switch directions a little bit. So we have demand planning products been made, right? Now we got to get it to our end consumers. So Vikas, talk to us about a little bit of your daily challenges and your journey, especially in the Indian context, for middle and last mile. So can we have the next slide, please?
Sure. Yeah. Let's stay at this for a minute. Thanks for the opportunity, Surya. So I'll talk about where we have challenges in the middle last mile from an Indian standpoint. That's kind of what I've been dealing with for the last year and a half, and it's been extremely exciting. Before I go there, I just want to reiterate a couple of points and maybe just shed some context into why India is a little different, right? At least in my experience, after having lived in the US for 15, 16 years, I mean, this has been very eye-opening and interesting. So just stepping back, supply chain, I think we all realize, is extremely important. In the e-commerce space, the supply chain is kind of responsible for delivering the product to the customer. That's the first time the customer actually sees the product. And, in a country like India, where e-commerce is growing like 20-25% every year, Ambika was talking about how the retail market or e-commerce market in India will be 350 million customers, which is the population of the US or more than that, right? We're bringing a lot of new customers on board, right? And providing that good first experience is critical. And supply chain is kind of that first point of real, like physical contact with the customer. So, supply chain is super, super critical in that sense. Now, what is different about India? And I would say there are two things, right? I mean, it is scale and diversity. Now, scale I talked about, right? It's 350 million customers. Diversity is what I think kind of makes it super interesting. The population of India has a whole lot more heterogeneity than the 350 million people in the US. So in terms of the infrastructure that we have going from a metro city to a tier 3 city, hugely different. The digital awareness of our customers, I mean, the other thing is, obviously we realize that, the earning potential of a person in India on average is lower than the US. So either their preference for cost or, cost efficiency is different. But even if you look at the variance of earning around that median for the two countries, hugely different, right? India has a much broader variance, a higher variance in earning potential. And what that means is, now, I mean, putting all that together, right, we're dealing with a lot more heterogeneous population to deliver our products to. So, supply chain, what is their role, right? So they're trying to deliver products at the lowest cost, in a reliable manner, at scale, at speed. Right. So how do you to actually deliver to this very diverse customer base that has different requirements, different understanding of what the, of what they need or of how things work, very different levels of infrastructure. How do you do that, right? And that is where the challenge of supply chain is. And I think, that is where intelligence comes in, right? I mean, we
Very good.
generate about, 5 terabytes of data a day.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data we generate, right? How the, e-commerce by definition, in my mind, is a low margin business. High volume, low margin. So the companies that will succeed in this market are the ones that are able to deliver at speed, lowest cost, based on what the customer needs, right? And doing that in a market like India at the level of heterogeneity, that is to me the challenge, and that is where AI and ML, intelligence, data, all of that really plays a huge role.
Right.
So that kind of to me summarizes the challenge. What I wanted to do is just talk about 2 examples to give you a flavor of some of the challenges and the opportunities in this space. So
Fantastic.
you could just move to the next slide. I'll take one example.
So before you start, Vikas, so what I'm hearing from you is when you talk about diversity, you're basically talking about diversity of the demand function itself, and that's not just quantity or the price point, but also the service expectations are different because, and then the latency expectations are different. The multiple dimensions of as we say, service quality, they play out differently at different strata of the society. And then, so it's a really complex mix, geographically, economically. So you have to, this is where the power of AI ML is. So that's what you were trying to get at, right? Is that this is a good fit. This tool is perfectly fit for these kind of really hard challenges.
Absolutely. And, I'll actually then, what you said made me think, Aman was talking about demand planning and all the variability in the demand planning side. I mean, what we're talking about in a sense is supply planning.
Right.
You still have to account for all the variability, all those multiple dimensions of what the customer wants, what kind of infrastructure we're going to have to deal with, etc., and build your supply plan according to that and deliver on lowest cost. Right?
Yeah.
So in that
ultimately, it's a matching game, right? It's a matching game of matching supply to demand, and they both happen at the same time. I mean, if we would have known either one of them, it would be game over. Yes. So this is interesting. Yeah, please, let's take us to an example.
So this first example that I picked is related to addresses in India, which, I mean, if you live in the US, this is probably not going to be an issue at all, right? Addresses in India are highly unstructured, they're poorly organized, and users or customers have a very different level of understanding of addresses. So just to give you some examples, I put some examples on the chart, right? I mean, some very interesting examples actually. So our customers have, in a lot of our customers don't really have a good understanding of what a good address is, right? So the first example in the first column, right? I'll kind of translate into English. What it is saying, the address is saying, I live in the lane of this Zamzam hotel next to a mosque. My place is actually saying, you come to the shop, the neighborhood shop next to somebody's house, then you give me a call, and then I will, essentially I'll come there to pick up my order, right? To make it specific, the individual did tell the name of the city and provided a PIN code, right? And
so this is a real example. This is a real example.
Yes.
My goodness.
Right?
My goodness.
Just another example, right? Most of our customers get the PIN code wrong, right? Actually, if you look at Gurgaon, for example, right? Gurgaon is a very, very planned city, right? Split up into sectors, etc. Almost everybody in the city uses the same PIN code, one PIN code, whereas there are 20 PIN codes or more than 20 PIN codes in Gurgaon, right? So just third example, the person didn't really write anything, right? Other than I'm guessing Biswanath Chirali is probably a city or a town, and that's all they wrote, right? So people don't understand what they need to provide for an address. The other set of examples on the right of that, really, addresses in India structurally, well, there's no defined unified structure.
Yeah.
So some people, the first example is really, this city, this city near this school, and then somebody's name, right? I mean, essentially the expectation is this person will have to go find, go to that school and go to the panwala next to the school, the school, and ask where this person is, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are more examples we can talk about, but hopefully that gives you an idea of the challenge, right? I mean, see, in the end, like I said, right, the customer experience is really important. If you don't know where you're going to deliver, it's extremely difficult to deliver on time at lowest cost. Last mile supply chain costs are about 30% of the overall costs.
Absolutely.
Right? So this makes a huge difference to how effectively we are able to deliver at low cost. You're going to ask questions, Surya.
Yeah, what I'm saying here is that the challenge is enormous because not only that it's unstructured data, but you actually don't know what is unstructured.
Yeah.
A priori, you don't even know what you don't know.
Right.
So, I mean, you can handle unstructured data if you have some remote idea of, what could be unstructured, and then you can try to kind of work around this.
Sure.
So
this structure ensures job security for the
So
this ensures job security for the locals.
I mean, so AI has a huge role here because so essentially we make millions of deliveries a day, right? Can we use the data around, can we actually understand the structure of addresses, right? And together with what we already know about maps, together with the delivery data that we record, right? Can you bring all of that together to actually solve this problem? That's the issue. To your point, Aman, I don't think we can go all the way. It can never be perfect, right? It has to be a combination between algorithm and what I would call the expert judgment of the person who's delivering. Which, I mean, to me, honestly, this is where, again, the India story is a little different than the US story, right? I think in the end, given the uncertainty in the way we operate in our country, that man plus machine combination is extremely important. But machine has a huge role here, right? So anyway, in this area, as you can imagine, right, there's a huge opportunity, right? I mean, we have hundreds of millions of address information about hundreds of millions of addresses, where we delivered, what is the text that was that provided, right? So, just to be specific, right, some problems that we look at are, okay, if you give me text, I can do a prediction of where actually that we think the geolocation for that address is, what is the latitude and longitude, right? And on top of that, you can build all your routing optimization algorithms, etc. That's one. But even before that, how do you prompt the customer to provide the right information when they're entering the address? So if they provide the wrong PIN code, can we correct the PIN code? If as they're entering data, can we actually realize, like you said, that the address is incomplete or erroneous? And can we prompt them, right? For a person who's not well versed, can we take an incomplete address and point to them, okay, are you close to this location? So then we can kind of, they can say yes, and then that adds some granularity to the address that will help our delivery person, right? So there are a lot of different algorithmic opportunities that could be based on data that we can use to kind of solve this problem, which could really help speed up deliveries and make our overall cost position much more efficient. So that's one example I wanted to talk about. That's really from the last mile perspective.
Sure.
If you could switch to the next slide. So the other one I wanted to talk about is kind of more strategic and middle mile, right? So, and this is kind of, I learned this is probably overlapping with what Aman did earlier in his career, right? Which is really around supply chain network design, right? So, I mean, just to set context, right? I mean, when a person places an order, right, that order in a, places an order on an e-commerce site, it could be, fulfilled by that e-commerce company, or it could be, it could be a marketplace sale, right? So essentially what happens is, to get to the customer, the order or the shipment is goes through a sortation center. It goes through a bunch of hops through a middle mile, a line haul, essentially a set of trucks. It goes to your neighborhood delivery location, a delivery warehouse, a hub, and then from there it is picked up and it comes to the customer, right? Now, how we design this whole middle mile, right? Or where are your sortation centers? Which fulfillment center connects to what hub? How many trucks do you have in your middle mile? Which truck goes where? What time the truck leaves? Each of the trucks leaves. This kind of is the supply chain network design, right? And that design essentially it's the fundamental building block or the blueprint of the overall network. It effectively, that's probably the first order effect. So if demand planning was the first order effect, I'll say this is probably the 1.5 of the second order effect that will impact the way your supply chain is actually going to perform, right? So hugely important problem. And this was, again, this is an area where intelligence is extremely important, because scale is super important here, right? I mean, just to give you an idea, we are working on a problem that, we're trying to optimize the routes that a shipment will take through the middleman. The planning problem, right? I mean, every month we get a demand plan, like Aman talked about. We know, what source, what destination combination will have how much demand. We just have, for each combination, we have to figure out the optimal path to be taken, accounting for all the middle mile issues, right? And we're looking at 10 to the power 76 choices to optimize, right? That's kind of the same, it's around the number of atoms in the universe, right? So that is scale is extremely important. Where India comes in, scale obviously is one issue, right? I mean, we're big geographically and population wise, but the other interesting thing, and it's tied to where we are as a e-commerce industry, is we have a sale every other month, right? Or maybe every month, right? When you have sale every month, you're in that 1 or 2 day period, your demand is going to spike. It's going to go, 1.4x, 1.5x, 2x, 3x. How do you build a network that is resilient and robust across such high variations in demand? Because again, you put too much capacity, you're going to have high cost, etc. Right? Absolutely. So demand, essentially there's a problem of scale, building algorithms to optimize across this complexity, but also building resilient algorithms building algorithms for resilient, robust networks, and being able to re-optimize them very, very quickly, right? So those are, I guess, those are 2 examples. I can talk a little more, but I think I'll pause there and then.
No, this is a great segue actually, because that was fantastic, and what a beautiful connection you made with demand planning, because ultimately these are integrated systems. So we'll come back to both Aman and Vikas will come back. I'll come back and probe you guys on the data requirements for doing, because you guys are talking about massively complex solutions here, and the bedrock is going to be access to good data. We've talked about that, but before that, I want to actually invite Shilpa. Shilpa, I want you to jump right in, and so can we have the next slide, please? And talk to us about what role is fintech and process automation playing in this whole mix of handling this such a complex system that is growing more and more complex by the day because of supply side and demand side characteristics. So share some of your experience, as a product leader, engineering leader in this sphere, where you are not necessarily seeing the same system as Vikas and Aman are doing on a basis, but you're looking at the system from a very different cut. So what are your thoughts? Talk to us a little bit about this area.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting landscape, and one of the things that I was, I have, we have, as we have, we speak to a lot of big, small customers globally, right? Across. Traditionally, and as we all know, supply chain management has been looked as sourcing, making, delivering. That's where typically the focus has been. Over the past few years, there's with the advent of digitization, there has been focus on digital transforming, as you are very much aware of that, Surya, in that space. But what we see more and more, especially post-pandemic, the challenges that have been facing the supply chain industry is definitely increased cost. There's been inflation. I think there is a global inflation right now, so everything is more expensive. And what is that resulting into is the interaction between your main entities of in a supply chain, your buyers and your suppliers. As the goods are making way across, there is a significant amounts of money that is being tied up in receivables. It's across the globe, especially when there is also cross-border commerce that is involved. I mean, just to give you a scale, I was reading an article for one of the assessment we have been doing. There's across, there is apparently $3 trillion dollars. That's an outstanding receivables amount.
Oh my God.
Yeah, $3 trillion dollars payments. There's a trade gap. So you see, that's where there is this more urgency of what can we do from a B2B standpoint. There is a need.
So, Shilpa, let me interject here, because some of our audience, can you explain when you say receivables, what does it mean from a company's perspective? Why is it so important? Because it literally means that company may not have cash to operate.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you pretty much nailed it. Receivables is, the way the whole industry works is that if the buyer is ordering, right? It starts with your procurement and putting in an order to a supplier. The supplier, I think, an example of the fidget spinner, the supplier, they have to go and procure that product and be ready to deliver it to the buyer. So in this case, till they get paid, their money is tied up. Right,
Exactly.
this is the whole money that is tied up, especially if you look at cross borders, because of so many, all of what we have heard over the industry, the delays in going through the supply chain, delays that are happening. Think about the suppliers where their money is all locked up. The buyers are waiting for getting the goods, and probably the buyers have, if in the B2B world, the buyers might have their own customers who are waiting for those goods. So there is a lot of money that is tied up in this whole industry, and that's where you have big players like banks, you have treasury banks, you have your small little fintech providers where are trying to jump in over here and trying to make the most of the situation. We'll come back. But I hope that helps. Does that clarify?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks for the clarification. Yeah,
because I'm going there, and that's what it's a good point, because now, because of this, companies are facing two primary problems as we are speaking to so many of them, right? And that's where you see so many fintech innovations happening is really when making payments to suppliers. The thing is, they want more working capital. The working capital has dwindled. There needs to be more working capital. People, all the buyers do want more money to play with. They want to extend their payment time. So if you think about it, when the buyers do receive the goods from the suppliers, their clock starts. Their payment clock starts, where they have to go and pay to the suppliers, and the suppliers are waiting for that amount. So the primary, if you look from a buyer standpoint, what is that they are looking for? They are looking at, what can I do to extend my buying time? How can I get extensions, right? Is there somebody who can be a broker, who can pay on my behalf? So my payment, I get a default extension for my payment cycle. From a supplier standpoint, what the supplier is looking for, that hey, I need to get paid on time. If I get paid, and there are a lot of different options, right? As you go into this B2B huge space, right? Or if you have loyalty with existing customers, you go into equity or debt, or you have recurring payments or prorated payments, right? There are a lot of this. So where is more of the what is the supply looking for? With the 3 trillion gap that I'm talking about, right? Across the different supplies, they want to get paid. They want to get paid quickly. They want to get paid in whole, right? They probably would prefer if they get paid the whole amount. They are ready to give some discounts. So these are all the makings, the complexities, the nuances that are being played. The bigger, richer suppliers can probably afford with the prorated, with the debt kind of lending out, lending options, right? But the smaller, there are a lot of small, extra small, even the middle market. That's a big segment, right? Small business, the middle market, I think has now reduced to a smaller mom and pop, who are trying to make it through this whole post-pandemic. They have really how do they go ahead with it? So that's the whole problems that we are seeing. The other problems we are seeing is shortage of workforce, right? There's shortage of workforce. There is a lot of friction, right? There's a lot of friction in the information data, as there are a lot of third parties involved, right? The whole supply, and I think all of you like Aman, and because as they were showing all these pictures and giving their examples, I mean, one thing that stands out is there's so much of handoff that is happening. I mean, overall, right? From even if you talk traditional model, sourcing, making, delivery, there is a lot of information that is moving, and there is a lot of data that is getting moved across. There are a lot of players too. If we talk about suppliers, there is a lot of in the supplier space. There may be, I may be making dresses, so my suppliers for buttons may be different, for my cloth may be different. So there were a lot of suppliers out there, and within the suppliers as well, there is no marketplace. Is for me as a buyer to have options where I can go and pick the suppliers, and I have an end-to-end visibility. So that's causing the information friction. Everyone knows as where we stand today, we cannot afford, because of the shortage of workforce. What does that mean? You need to have some kind of an automation going on. And what does that mean? When we talk about automation in very raw terms, what does really we mean by automation is really we being able to repeatable manual tasks. What can we do to digitize them to achieve efficiency in this? And it's in very raw terms. But if you have to think about it from tech terms, that really means investment in technology. So that's another problems that are facing the supply chain. With inflation, increased cost, delays, friction in data and information due to so many third-party suppliers and producers that are involved, technology investment, shortage of workforce. So how can tech solve? That's where fintech is making a lot of entry into the space, right? Where really, and you have small little fintech solutions that can really assist with increasing the working capital. Like I was saying, they can essentially act as brokers, right? They can be the brokers for buyers, saying, hey, buyers, you can come and get onboarded to our platform. And we have a bunch of suppliers. So they have this relationship going on with buyers and suppliers, where they are saying, we are here as a platform, get onboarded to us, and we will to the buyers what the beauty for the buyers, right? The buyer experience in this says that, hey, we will quickly give you what you're looking for, extension on your payments. We will help you with your making payments on your behalf to the suppliers. We will help you with streamlined process from a contract management standpoint, invoice reconciliation standpoint. I'll get to it a little bit for people who are not probably in that industry. I'll talk about it more. But to our buyers, this seems so good, and all I have to do is get onboarded onto this platform, and I have to just look at what I have to, what I'm looking for if my supplier is over there, make that relationship, and then the fintech takes care of it. My payments gets extended. I get more working capital to play with, which I can then turn around and use it for whatever purpose the buyer wants to use it for, right? What does the supplier get out of this? So the supplier is, again, this is where there is an ability. That's where the fintech is looking at, right? There's an ability for getting that total account payable. You want to get your suppliers in them, give them new pricing strategies, right? If you look at the fintech solutions, what will be attractive to the suppliers? Hey, come and get onboarded to us. We will give you some discount we will give you different pricing for dealing with your account payables. We'll help you with the payments getting to you on time. We'll pay you the amount that is required, or we give you different pricing strategies. So essentially, what the supplier is getting, they are getting paid on time. They don't have to follow up with the buyers, because you have a broker sitting right here as part of the as a fintech. There is many times, a flat fee model that is being done. And in many cases, as you keep on looking into it, when I talked about invoicing, right? So if you look at invoice management is seems very easy, but people who have been in this field, it's not. Invoice management leads to a lot of typos, and some of the issues that I think Vikas he was mentioning about those, from an India standpoint, where people are not filling up information. Same is the case with invoicing. Many times the invoices are so badly written, there's not much clarity. Sometimes the information is wrong. How do you even audit it? The invoices go through, and many times the reconciliation happens. So reconciliation is really, you read the invoice, you match, whether this was the payment that was actually made, where the goods received. Fintech will be able to do that, and then they go and approve the invoice, and that's where the reconciliation happens, right? Then they are paid, right? Then the suppliers get paid. So in this case, think about it, there's a gap. You don't even know, there's a lot of human error. And if you look at the industry, again, there is almost an opportunity in multi-million dollars. If I had to look at a term, I would say actually in towards the $1 billion, where invoice management has a big role. That's why when we talk about this all $3 trillion of outstanding receivables, it also has the whole audit portion to play with it. So those are some of the things that that problems exist, and this is where fintech comes in. Future, there is this trend. So what I'm talking about, where is this traceability? How do we trace it? A very recent trend that is going on. I think I believe Walmart is really doing some study in this. There is a paper out for what Walmart is looking into it. Maybe you know about it as well, because being in Flipkart. Blockchain. You use blockchain to drive supply. It's a future trend, but it's catching on. I think some of AWS offerings are, and IBM is doing it too. But using blockchain to drive this transparency. We talked about this information and data friction that is happening, right? But essentially, how do you create this transparency and traceability?
In fact, Shilpa, no, I'm continue talking. So I'm going to ask for the next slide. That's one of the main drivers of supply chain 5.0, of how to create this transparency through blockchain system, because basically they are ledgered systems which are immutable ledgers, right? So there are many. It's already used for conflict diamond mining and things like that. It's already prevalent in some of those industries, but it's now coming in a big way. And some of what struck me, can we put the next slide on, please? One of the things that struck me, Shilpa, what you just mentioned here, was the parallelism you drew between what Vikas was talking about with, for example, address, being the same problem. You're absolutely right with invoicing. In fact, one of the recent studies we did last year in the cloud space for a startup, we found that invoices on a 30-day term, on an average, it gets delayed to 67 to 83 days. That's the amount of delay that gets introduced in the system. From a monetary standpoint, that may mean that you are looking at a smaller supplier can go out of business. And so there's now an emerging trend of identifying liquidity hotspots in your upstream suppliers, because no matter how well Aman's demand planning is, or how well Vikas's algorithms run to deliver, if you don't have the supplier supplying the product and they go out of business, you can never plan or you can never deliver. So the reality of thing is that supply chain management is the backbone of the business, but it goes end to end. So when you talk about traceability, you actually have to have that end-to-end vision, where as far as possible, as you can see, to kind of, tackle the problem before it kind of happens. So when you talk about fintech and process automation playing that role, just the role of basic data, because a lot of your intelligence is built on good data. And if it's not available,
I think there is. I want to just add to that. It's data, and there's also as we talk about so many different touch points. There is a big push. I think it's hyper automation. If that's one of the top trend has been this year and probably will continue into next year. The business process management, as we talk about, the workflow orchestration. It is very that is required to, when we look at a conductor who is conducting a symphony or an orchestra,
Right.
you need, there's that need of intelligent automation coming in that space too.
I think we are towards the end of our session. Three of you have provided like a really, I feel like excited because there's so many different angles. So the common message that I want for our viewers to take home and take to their workplace is don't think about chains, think about networks. First of all, this is a complex, interconnected web of companies that are actually trying to deliver, across different touch points. What we see in the current context of, for example, semiconductor chip shortages, that's not happening just because, some supplier could not produce to capacity. It's happening because consumption trends are changing, weather patterns are changing, geopolitical events are happening. So, number of these, so you have to have that macro view, like Aman touched upon, good data, access to good data, and integration and democratization of that data across your business functions becomes super critical. Then leveraging fintech automation solutions to make sure the data is clean and it's repeatable and it's coming on a regular basis. For example, using OCR technology or natural language processing for actually making sure that your invoices are getting, because a lot of places, they still do phone invoicing. And people do, and all of this for the downstream people don't realize that how much upstream work happens and the vice versa. So more of a cross-functional approach, the collaborative approach that 5.0 is now talking about, automation of data, collaborative efforts, they are the things that are really going to do. And you need to empower your employees. You need to keep that culture in your organization when you enable cross-functional engagement and talks. You need to learn from what Lean did 20 years back, implementing production efficiencies in organization, was by breaking that barrier down. And I think supply chain is now staring at that future right there, because you cannot use AI and ML and all of this unless you have access to good data that is talking to each other. And that's not going to happen unless the right hand is talking to the left hand. Now, I have a couple of questions. I'm going to throw it out. Any one of you can pick it up. So the first question is from the audience. I don't think AI ML can predict unusual events like a sudden spike in demand. What are your thoughts about that? So who's going to take that?
I can take that, at least in part. So I think you have to also, that is a good question. I think that's right. But when an unexpected event happens, what do you do with it? Assuming that it's a level playing field, and then the organization that reacts to it the fastest is the one that will come out to be the winner. And then that's where is like there's the ML and the AI, the better ones will win, right? So if country A decides to break their ties with country B and that affects the whole world, then what do you do with that and how fast you react to it is what matters. And not everything else is kind of being equal.
Yeah, I'll just add a specific example to what Aman said, right? So when September 11 happened, right, in the US, essentially the entire airline network was shut down for a few days. I don't know if it was for a week, right? The company that came out ahead, and of course, obviously that is not an event that anybody could have predicted, right? Sure. And the company that came out ahead was Continental Airlines, because they were the company, they were the airline company that had the best algorithms to be able to reschedule all their flights within, in a short period of time, based on essentially the new rules that were being set on security, transportation, and all of that. And essentially with all their planes sitting in different locations that they didn't plan to. So you can't predict everything, but you can react, is what Aman is saying. And I think that is kind of, in my mind, that's kind of
I want to add another example as well on that. What happened, COVID, right? I do want, from a fintech standpoint, we want to add that lens. Again, maybe not all use cases. I think I do agree with that statement. Not all use cases, but again, I think where you can use it, If you didn't have it, you would not even be able to do it. So a classic example during COVID was all these lockdowns happened. So there was really the small business that, especially in the US, right? There was the government announced the small business loans, the PPP, the paycheck loans that were payables that were made available. Now the thing was there were a lot of banks and there were a lot of brokers out there, right, who wanted to offer it. But how soon can you make it make that offering? How soon can you identify? So that's where every banks who are fintech or the fintechs even, right, who had that data. So data became really the master in that case, right, where they could use algorithms from a risk standpoint, which are the companies or the small businesses that we do business with. We can calculate based on these models, predict the risk, prediction of the risk, and then offer those the loans to those kind of to those that segment. So that's where the banks or the fintechs who had the data and who had those models in place, were quickly able to get the share of that. And again, the money was governments, but what the relationship you want to be building with your customers, right? That stickiness, that is something that remained.
That's a great point. Well, all right. So we are almost at the end. I have time for one short, quick question. And this one is going to be interesting. The question is, does AI and ML technology play roles in providing sourcing solutions? And so I think, Shilpa, you have talked a little bit about this already. You have alluded to that with respect to contract management and the brokerage role. But is there anything else that any one of you would like to add? So from the sourcing perspective, so in a sense, we are looking upstream and you're thinking about getting, how is AI and ML being leveraged?
For contract management, I can just jump into that. Contract management, you use NLP, have some kind of an intelligence tools that can help you read. Contracting legal is a big process. There are a lot of companies fintech who are investing in that. AI ML plays a big role in that space.
Yeah, and just as a closeout, there are all the main procure-to-pay systems, Coupa or SAP, Oracle, they are all actually now building AI, ML-based tech, and they're creating data lakes actually around this, because what they are trying to integrate blockchain solutions and getting AI and ML into smart contracts. And so I think a big revolution is coming in the next 5 to 10 years in how sourcing will be done and get managed, and how you will track your suppliers, select your suppliers, monitor your suppliers, do scorecards for your suppliers. So that could be another panel, another day. So I would like to wrap it up now, and I would like to thank each one of you, Vikas, Shilpa, Aman. This was a really invigorating discussion and intellectual, but at the same time practical. So thank you for sharing your thoughts across your experience profile. And this is hugely beneficial for everybody listening in. Hopefully everybody feels as energized as I am. I always feel energized about supply chain. So I look forward to talking to each one of you. A huge thanks. And I'm going to hand the baton back to the team. And thank you, Ambika, and the team back there for hosting us. This was an awesome opportunity.
Thank you so much, Surya, and our rest of our panel. We really, really enjoyed this session. Thank you very much for sharing very practical and insightful details from your areas, right? We really appreciate you taking time to join us today and answer our questions as well. And thank you, Surya, for helping moderate and make this really, really a wonderful panel discussion.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Great.